Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Angela and I'm an angelic Arcturian. And today I wanted to transmit to you guys a little bit about how to heal the abandonment wound. This is how I have learned how to heal my own abandonment wounding. It's really going to depend on the severity of your trauma as to if you can do this on your own or if you're going to need to get a licensed therapist to help you work through more complex trauma. So that's something that you are going to have to use your judgment and decide. If you have severe trauma, please don't try to work through this alone. Find somebody that you trust and that can help you work through these very difficult emotions, okay? Just want to put that out there. I don't want anyone to exacerbate any existing trauma. The goal is to heal, right? So what I did is I first went back to where the trauma began, where it all started. And for me, that was when I was about 5 years old and my father told me that he's leaving and he's not coming back. My father's father was abusive and also abandoned him. So my father passed his own abandonment wounding into me when we had that conversation that day. And I still remember it clear as day, even though I was only 5 years old, because I just remember how wrong it felt that he was leaving. And so in that moment, he passed on his trauma to me, and that's how generational and familial trauma gets passed down from generation to generation, because my father did not take the time or have the awareness to heal his own abandonment wounding and trauma. He ended up abandoning us and passing on that wounding to us. So that's why it's so important to heal this type of trauma so you can really clear your family line and quit passing dysfunction and suffering down to the next generation. So it was in that moment that the abandonment wound was installed into me, and my mother essentially nurtured that abandonment wound throughout my childhood by just the lifestyle that she chose to have. She was a very young soul, and she liked to party a lot, and so my house was always the party house growing up, and there wasn't very much consistency, stability, or safety in my household. I never knew what I was going to come home to after school. Many times she would be just totally shit-faced drunk by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, falling on the ground. So I didn't have structure or stability in my childhood either, and that really nurtured this abandonment wound even more because I didn't feel safe. And so as I grew up and grew into my 20s and started getting into relationships, that's when the real dysfunction of the abandonment wound really starts to shine. And I was running a lot of corrupt subconscious programs as a result of that wounding. And so the second phase, once you realize where the wounding was installed, it's important to look at what behaviors you adapted to survive as a result of this abandonment wounding. For me, I was seeking attention and validation in very toxic ways. I was a stripper for several years. I always wanted to be sexy and get all the attention from the guys because of my body and my looks and my sexuality, and not holding myself in high regard and seeking the wrong type of attention. And I definitely got it. So that was behaviors that I adopted. And then some more behaviors that I adopted was I was always the first to terminate relationships. I don't think that there is really any of my boyfriends that broke up with me. I was always the one to break up with them first. That was a protective mechanism to keep me from being abandoned. Another survival behavior I adopted was anytime somebody would abandon me, I would get incredibly angry. I had the worst temper and I would get so upset anytime somebody abandoned me because it was triggering that wounding again and again, and I just didn't understand why I was attracting all this pain and rejection and abandonment to me. But it was like a repeat cycle again and again and again. And for someone like me who has a deep core abandonment wound that's been compounded through years in relationships of continuous being abandoned and rejected, being cheated on is the absolute ultimate betrayal and the absolute worst thing in my book that you can do to me. And as a result of having this great fear of being cheated on, I was cheated on by almost every guy that I dated. It was very cyclical. It was the same energy, different boyfriend, again and again and again. I would jump into relationships too soon. I would go all in because I just wanted someone to love me and validate me. And I would end up with really toxic, immature men who didn't have the emotional maturity or availability to match what I was seeking. But at that time, I was seeking more validation and approval than anything. So I was running toxic programs too. And that's why I was attracting these guys to me, so that I could ultimately resolve this wounding. So I would attract partners to me that would cheat on me and lie to me and abandon me and reject me again and again and again. And it really put me into a victim consciousness because I just couldn't understand why this kept happening. What I know now is that I had a core abandonment wound that was screaming to be healed. But it took 20 or 30 years to finally figure this out, you guys. So I really hope that you guys can figure this out a lot sooner and save yourself the pain. So once we identify the behaviors that we have as a result of this wounding, then we're going to jump into some healing meditations, start doing inner child work. There are some videos on YouTube that are like healing your inner child meditations. You can do guided ones, they'll kind of walk you through it, or you can just choose to go off on your own in these meditative states. But when you go into these meditative states, it's important to go in with the intention of healing, with the intention of reliving the trauma in order to heal it, not to reactivate it. So if it becomes too intense, you can always pull yourself out of it. Only do what you feel comfortable with, because this wounding comes up in layers. It's not a one and done type deal. So as we begin working through these different layers, it's important to stay aware of how we're feeling. And if things get too overwhelming, just take a few steps back. But what you want to do is go into a meditative state. Imagine your inner child self and imagine your adult self. And what you really want to do is just nurture your inner child self and meet those needs for your inner child that weren't met in that moment that the trauma was installed. So I would imagine my adult self at that moment where the trauma was installed, and I would tell myself and explain to myself and hold myself and love myself and make sure that my child self knew that it had nothing to do with my value or me at all, and it was simply his own self-destructive mechanisms playing out and me being collateral damage in his own self-destructive behavior, which is the case with most people and situations. 99% of the time, what people do to us has nothing to do with us and has everything to do with how they feel about themselves, their traumas and what they're going through, what corrupt programs they're running, and their own level of self-destruction and self-sabotage. So you don't want to adapt their wounding and trauma and take it on as your own by thinking that it has anything to do with you or your value. And whenever you adopt that pain and say, well, this is mine too, because I'm not worthy, then you're just compounding your pain and your suffering. Okay, so it's important to have the perspective that what other people do has more to do with them than it does about you, and that's so important to understand. So we want to begin feeling these emotions and working through them, and sometimes all it really takes, guys, is a really good cry. And if you need to cry for 4 hours about the pain of this wound, then do it. Let all the emotions out, cry, scream, whatever you've got to do. It may be uncomfortable in the short term, but you are saving yourself the rest of your life in suffering as a result of this wound. So yeah, it's it's not comfortable when we're feeling these painful feelings, right? This abandonment, this rejection, this loss and sadness. But as we feel them, we are releasing them and freeing them from our body. As we feel them, we try to get a different perspective on it. We try to understand it in a new way, and we try to find some forgiveness for the people that have hurt us. And a lot of times, finding forgiveness is about understanding that hurt people hurt people. And I know that sounds really cliche, but it's true. They're passing and acting out of their wounding, and it has nothing to do with your value. I just cannot stress that enough, because I know for me, I took it personally, and I took it that it was a direct attack on my value and that I didn't have any. And I felt like I was not valuable for many years of my life as a result of being abandoned, because I figured there must be something wrong with me if guys keep cheating on me, if guys keep doing this or that or the other. But the truth was, it was just my wounding asking to be resolved. So we have to start working through and processing the emotions, guys, and this can be uncomfortable, but it's going to help you in the long term. It's really going to free you from the destructive patterns of this wound. So, and this is going to come up in layers. You're going to get triggered later on, 6 months down the road, and something's going to trigger that abandonment wound in you. And you're going to have to revisit it, and you're going to have to work through the emotions again. It's an ongoing process. But ultimately, you're going to be so much happier. You're going to be more fulfilled. You're going to have more self-confidence. You're going to have healthier relationships. Like, I can't even stress how much it's going to improve your life to heal this wound. So we want to stay conscious and aware of our behaviors, what we do that's acting out of abandonment, and when we catch ourselves doing it, we correct that behavior. And that ultimately, after a period of practice and time of doing this, is going to really get you out of that abandonment wound and really just heal it up to where it won't be destructive in your life anymore. And that's ultimately what we want. We want to get out of self-sabotage and get out of suffering and get out of emotional pain. So yeah, so I mean, that's what I've done. I continue to work on it every day. It's a never-ending process, and it does get triggered every now and then, and I do have to revisit and heal some more of it, but it's worth it. It's worth it, the discomfort in the short term, to have the long-term gain of being emotionally healthy. So yeah, guys, I hope that helps you and gives you an idea of kind of how to work through it. There's lots of resources out there, and don't be shy to work with a therapist when it comes to this type of pain. It can get really complex and really distorted, so make sure that you're safe while you're working through it. And if there's any way I can help you, I am doing a mentorship program on my Facebook group, Starseed Nation. The link is in the description below. If you would like to be mentored by me for free, just join my group and hit the mentorship tab, and you can add me as a mentor. But I just want to be clear again, I am not a therapist. I am not a licensed professional. So if your situation is more complex, please find a professional to work with. But if you feel you can work through this on your own, or you would like a little guidance from me, please join my group, and we can work together as a mentor-mentee and kind of work through this together. So don't be afraid to do that if you feel the desire to do so. And yeah, I guess I will see you guys next time.